Okay, thank you everybody for joining us for the final class of this session. And again, this is the sixth consecutive mitzvot that one has to be aware of and thinking about at all times. And we said, of course, we're human. It's hard for us to do that, but at least be aware that we have to and work on constantly being aware of these different mitzvot and thinking about them. So just to quickly recap, we had the first one is knowing God. There's loving God. There's fear of God. There is making sure that you are knowing God is one, right? And then we had the last ones, which was being aware of God's presence, and we had two parts of the oddness of God. We spoke about the two parts of the oddness of God. So now I want to speak about the last one, which does not have the word God in it. Okay, so it's a little different than the other ones, which as we said, the love of God, knowing God, the oneness of God, the oddness of God. Right? This is called. Do not be misled by your heart and by your eyes. Lo sesiru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem. This is a statement that we should all be very aware of. We say this every day. We say this in the Shema, right? At the end of the Shema, by the verse of Tzitzit, all the way before we say Hashem Elokeichem Emet, and right before that we say Lo sesiru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem. Do not follow your after your eyes, right, and after your heart. So the commentators explain that this is a consecutive thing. It doesn't tell you when. And just to recap, a consecutive thing means to say that there's no boundaries, there's no guidelines of when to do it. Right? Here in the shofar, you got to do it only Rosh Hashanah. Even making a blessing, it's only before you eat. Right, but this is something all the time. Lo sesiru achrei levavchem. Do not go after your heart, v'achrei einechem, and after your eyes. So the question is, what does this mean? What's the depth behind this? And there's many, many conversations about this, many things to analyze. We could give a whole series on this itself. But I want to home in on a couple of things. Number one, it says, lo sesiru. What does sesiru mean? Right? Before we start understanding, some of the practical applications, what does it mean, lo sesiru? It says lo selech, do not go after. Lo sesiru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem. So it said lo telech, do not go after. Lo sesiru is an interesting word, and the commentators explain that sesiru, right, is more of a being misled. Right? Lo sesiru is a word being misled. Do not be misled by your heart and by your eyes. And I think this is sort of an important introduction that we have to remind ourselves that we are not necessarily in control. And that's some of the things that we're going to talk about. We could be misled by our hearts and by our eyes. And we're going to talk about how to make sure we don't get misled and what are the dangers of being misled. But we have to realize that we could be misled internally ourselves. A lot of times we think being misled means to say being misled by other people, which happens, right? There's a mitzvah in the Torah, right, that you shouldn't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. And the commentaries explain it doesn't mean literal. It means literally, of course, but it doesn't necessarily mean literally. It could also be talking about a concept. Do not mislead people. Do not lead them astray. Do not give them bad advice. So usually we feel being misled is by other people, is by people we trusted, teachers, parents, friends, confidants, or just regular good old people being misled. But the Torah is telling us something very important, a very important piece in human nature, and something that we have to work on, that we can mislead ourselves. Can you imagine that? We can mislead ourselves. So how do we make sure we don't? And what are some of the dangers of being misled by ourselves? All right, so that's really the conversation of today's class. So the commentaries speak about this idea, right, that first and foremost, right, it says, do not be misled by your heart and by your eyes. We are a society, right, filled with simulations, right? We have TV, we have radio, we have billboards, we have internet, right? I would say newspapers, but who gets newspaper? I mean, I know some people do get newspapers these days, right? But you know, we have visual experiences, we have virtual experiences, hearing music, MP3s, and all forms of technical advances in our ability to hear things and to see things and to understand things. The pursuit of all, right? The pursuit of all these different attractions and things are constantly on our door. So we have to be very aware, right? Very aware about this idea of do not be misled by your heart and by your eyes. We have to be very aware of this, right? So let's talk about a couple of ideas. Let's now break this down because, as I said, this is something that's hard, right? It's something that is in everyday activities. How do we make sure that we don't? Now, just before we start that, I do want to say one thing. In certain ways, it's actually easier, and I know I sound like I'm contradicting myself, but I'm not, because there's really two sides to every story. In a certain way, actually, with all the technology that we have, with all the things that we have, we could actually comprehend more than we could be misled by ourselves. Because when someone goes into a virtual reality, someone's watching a movie, someone's listening to something on the radio, do they know for sure what they're hearing is true? Sometimes they even know that they're in a fantasy. They know that they're doing something that's not truly real. They know that they're misleading themselves into a false narrative. So if we stop and reflect on it and think about it, we actually have the tools, and our society, yes, on one hand, could totally mislead us and send us astray. But if we focus on it in the right ways, and that's what some of the things we're going to talk about, on the contrary, we could actually make sure that we recognize that we can mislead ourselves. We could actually focus on that and realize that. And by recognizing that, it helps us to make sure that we are constantly aware of what we're doing. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's an interesting situation we're in, where on one hand, we could totally mislead ourselves, totally be off. On the other hand, if we look at it in a different perspective, we could actually utilize it for our benefit. And we're going to talk about that in a little later. So let's start off. The verse says like this. The commentaries point out, right, that it says, Lo sasuru achre levavachem. Right? Now, what's levavachem? How do you say heart in Hebrew in a singular form? Leiv. Lo sasuru achre leiv. What's levavachem? Levavachem is plural. Levavachem is plural. So einechem, you could say, I have two eyes. So after your two eyes. But levavachem is plural. I only have one heart. So what does it mean, lo sasuru achre levavachem? Don't go after your heart. It's plural. The commentaries ask, the Talmud speaks about this. What does it mean, achre levavachem? So just to put it out there, the simple answer, right, the straightforward shot, right? There's the simple reading of the Torah, which of course is never simple, but the simple reading of the Torah is levavachem, referring to the Jewish people. Right? It's talking in a plural sense, not to an individual, but God is talking to the Jewish people. You guys should not go after your hearts, and not referring to one individual with two hearts. Right? It could be someone from an alien planet then. But meaning to say that in a plural sense means to say all the Jewish people, and therefore it says it in a plural. That's possible, and that's the simple reading of the verse. But there's a much deeper idea over here, and the commentaries point out, as you can see, the beard's getting a little itchy. But the commentaries point out that what it means to say, right, achre levavachem, in a plural sense, that we have two hearts. Really? We have two hearts? We have two hearts? Commentaries say, yes, we have two hearts. we have the heart doesn't necessarily refer to our actual heart that beats. All right, our heart, levavachem, refers to our inclinations. Refers to our inclination. Yetzer tov, yetzer hara. Right? It refers to we have a struggle. We have a constant struggle. We have our struggle in life is with our good little angel with the wings and the little circle on top. And then we have our red angel with the pitchfork, right, with the little horns. And we have our little different guys on each side, right, and telling us, oh, you're going to do bad. No, you're going to do good, right? Don't do that. Yes, do that. It's not really like that, okay? But we have two inclinations. And our heart refers to our inclination. Why is our heart referred to as our inclination? Maybe we'll get into that. But we have two inclinations. We have something called the Yetzer Tov, our desire to do good, our human being, our love for humanity, our social justice, right? Our relationship with God. That's our Yetzer Tov, our good inclination. And then we have our evil inclination, our animal component. And we spoke about our animal component before, our physical body. Kabbalists explain that it's our physical body that is seeking to satisfy itself, seeking to escape from work and from hardship, and just looking for comfort and looking for the easy way out. Wants to eat, sleep, and be merry, and that's it. Doesn't desire hardship, doesn't desire anything difficult, just wants to grow, just wants to enjoy its life in this world, like an animal. An animal grazes, eats, sleeps, eventually gets slaughtered, depends on the kind of animal. But that's our animal component in ourselves. And say the commentaries that God is telling us that lo sasiru achar levavachem, don't go after your hearts, means to say that you have to work with both of your hearts. And both of your hearts, right? You need to develop awareness inside of ourselves, right? To make sure that we are working and not following our evil inclination. We have to serve God with all your heart. Same way we say serve God with all your heart, right? It means to say that right, with all your hearts. We also have to make sure that we don't get astray with all our hearts, and we're going to talk about that. So how does this work? How do we know if we're working with our evil inclination or with our Yetzer Tov or our Yetzer Hara? How do we know? How do we know? So there's a little secret, and we'll talk about a couple of different things. Right? But when you look at something, right? How do you view it? Is it something you want, right, or you desire? And so, do you want to use your time effectively, right? Yet you desire to procrastinate, right? You want to eat healthy, but you desire cake. You want to acquire wisdom, yet you desire to watch movies, TV, play video games, and sit on the couch and klutz around. So we see that the growth, the wanting something, is a positive. The desire, something that's a desire, is in the negative. Now, I'm not saying not to eat cake. Trust me. I'm not saying not to klutz around sometimes. You need to. But we have to understand that the difference in our attitude, if it's I want or I desire. Now, a lot of times you say, oh, you shouldn't say I want. No, you could want. You want something good. Desire, right, comes from our animal component. Now, we're going to talk about it in a minute. We could curve it to the good. But we first have to understand, right, that wanting, right, is a root in reality. Desire, right, is getting ourselves out of reality. It's a moment of non-reality, right? That's so we even the terminology in our world. I desire something, right? I desire to live on an island, right, and have all the greatest things in the world. have my utopia with clean beaches, and that's a desire. Wanting something is more practical, right? So when the Torah says, "Do not be misled by your hearts," it's a consecutive mitzvah, as we said, right? You have to constantly fight and every day say, "How am I feeling? Am I doing something that I'm positive? Is that am I doing something that I'm following my Yetzer Tov, or am I following my Yetzer Hara? What am I doing? What am I doing? Let's think about this. And again, you could want to go to work and you could want to be financially secure. It's not against God's will. The desires, the negative things. So let's talk about a couple of practical things, how to make sure that we understand and we grow through these things. So, like this. And the Torah says like this. And the Torah says, right, that as we said, right, you should serve God b'chol levavcha, right? You serve God, you should love Hashem with all your hearts. Again, plural. And as I mentioned, right, we're talking about, right now we're looking at is the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. So we have to work on working with God from our Yetzer Tov and our Yetzer Hara. How do we do that? So number one, we have to understand, right? We have to understand that there's this concept, right, of elevating the physical. Right? There's a concept of elevating the physical. 1 second. Right? There's a concept of elevating the physical. Let's work on that. Number one. Number one is elevating the physical. So as we said, there's the wanting and the desire. That's one way of recognizing what's your Yetzer Tov or Yetzer Hara. But now, right, we said, Lo sesura achil, do not follow your heart. Right? Do not follow your hearts. And we said that's Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. But then there's a thing of you have to serve God with the Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. So the contradiction. Are we supposed to serve God with our Yetzer Tov and our Yetzer Hara? How can I serve God with my Yetzer Hara? And then don't follow your hearts. Don't follow your Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. What do you mean? Of course I should follow my Yetzer Tov. Why does it say it in plural again? So we sort of have a contradiction over here. We sort of have a conundrum of how to balance this. And the commentaries explain that the concept that we have to be aware that we have a Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara, and we have to utilize our Yetzer Tov and our Yetzer Hara to get closer to God. And you can say, what? To utilize a Yetzer Hara? How do we do that? To get closer to God. And what does it mean that we have to be aware of our Yetzer Tov? So the commentaries say like this, that we spoke about this in previous classes. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, wants us to grow. Doesn't want us to fail. He doesn't. It's not like a devil and a demon that the Christian world holds and other places hold. They don't have no power. They're all servants of Hashem. So they want us to grow. They want us to overcome our challenge. Each one has their own way of doing it. Right? The Yetzer Tov has his way by trying to make us do positive, and the Yetzer Hara is giving us the challenges for us to overcome it. So the commentators explain that when it says that we're supposed to serve God with our Yetzer Hara, meaning to say that when we overcome our challenges, when we do not listen to Yetzer Hara, we're serving God too. But even more than that. Even more than that. When we take a cup of wine, how do we look at the cup of wine? Right? I know now is the 9 days, so Shabbat, right? We take a yummy piece of pizza, right? Or eggplant parmesan, or whatever it is, something physical in the world. How do we look at it? We have money. We have a bank account full of money. How do we look at that? We look at it as, oh, that tastes so good. That's so great. Physical pleasure. There's nothing wrong with that. But as long as you elevate it by making a blessing beforehand, as long as your desires are being used to allow yourself to elevate the physical world. If someone has no desire for food, think about it. Unfortunately, there are people like that. It's a sickness. They have no desire for food. So they can't go ahead and thank God for the food that he gave them for the pleasures of this world. So we have to go ahead and utilize our desires for something positive. I'll tell you something scary. I think I mentioned this in the past. I don't remember when. But talking about the destructions of the temple, after the first temple, right? We know one of the reasons why this first temple was destroyed was for adultery, for abuse of sexuality. There's other things also, but that was one of the things. And therefore it says that the rabbis prayed, right? Idol worshiping also. And it says after the destruction of the temple, rabbis prayed that God should take away the evil inclination of idol worshiping, which we don't really have a desire like that. Okay, we spoke about there's other forms, but not bound down to a tree. And also, they should take away the evil inclination of the desire of sexual relationships. I prayed God because it destroyed the first temple. There's such immorality going on. And it says that after, I don't know exactly how long, but the Talmud says after a little while, the rabbis went ahead and prayed to God that he should return that desire and return that evil inclination. Commentators, what? Imagine the world, especially nowadays. And say the commentaries because the rabbis saw that there was no children being born. The world wasn't being populated. Because there isn't, God created that desire, and there could be something negative, but there should be something positive. We could use that evil inclination, the desire, but we create something positive. We make kedusha, we make a marriage, we make a holy act. Kedushin, marriage is called kedushin. Nachmanides has a whole essay about the holiness of a relationship between a husband and wife. Harat hamishpacha, the purity of the home, we call it. So we could go ahead and we could elevate that desire. We could elevate the physical, the mundane. That is utilizing your evil inclination for the good. That's elevating the physical. It's just one example. It's a mind-boggling thing if you think about it. And that's for everything. Eating, glory, right? The need to be recognized. It depends on what person has, but the drive of people, when in the chesed organizations that they created, of course, it comes from a good place, but it has a desire of something. Say the commentaries, that's really the depth behind the statement in the Talmud. Shelo lishma ba lishma. When someone does something not for the right reason, it comes for the right reason. Eventually, you'll do it for the right reason. Commentaries ask, why should anybody ever do something not for the right reason? No, we should only do it for the right reason. And the commentaries even ask the contradiction that says if someone does something not for the right reason, learning Torah could be dangerous. The commentaries explain that when someone does something not for the right reason, that it's dangerous is when he's doing it just to hurt other people. Like you want to be a rabbi because you want to be able to be on top of other people. You want to do a chesed, or you want to create something because you want to have control over other people and be in an arrogant way or hurting other people. Then it's dangerous. But if you're doing it not for the right reason, but because you want to grow, you want to, it feels good to do the right thing. You want to be recognized, not because other people to be put down, but you want to be recognized. Shalolishma, balishma, because the desires, our inclinations, the things that God gave us, we could either use that for bad, use those desires to create terrible pogroms, or we could use it to hurt other people and to create bad groups and to speak about and create terrible environments for people, or we could use it for something positive. You can be recognized in a positive way, or God forbid, in a negative way. So that's what it means to utilize both your yetzers, because the evil inclination is there to serve God also. But He wants you to overcome. He wants you to utilize the different inclinations, the challenges that He gives you. Number one, when you overcome them, that you grow. Number two, to channel those things for something positive, to grow and get closer to God. So that's one idea. right, of what it means, Mishnei Trechas. But then we asked, right, what does it mean not to, it says, don't go after your hearts. So what does it mean not to go after your good inclination? You should only go after a Yetzer Tov. Why should you feel that you're being misled by your Yetzer Tov? So the commentaries explain something so powerful, and I want to say it with a fascinating story, and I think it's very important, especially in this period of time, to reflect on this. It's a very interesting story in the book of Samuel. All the way in the beginning, right? Shmuel was born to who? Shmuel was born to Chana, right? And Chana was barren, right? Chana was barren, and she had a co-wife, right? Back in the days, right? And her name was Penina, and she had children. And it says that Penina, every time she had a child, anytime she did something, she would sort of rub it in the face of Chana. Said, "Oh, I'm taking my child to change his diaper. I'm going to feed him. I'm going to buy him new clothes or whatever I'm playing." And she would do it in front of Chana, right? And it says that she actually had good intentions. Her intentions were that Chana should feel so much pain that she should pray to God, and hopefully through that pain of praying to God through pain, God will listen to her prayer. And it worked. Right? It says, Chana says, my heart is broken, and the famous prayer that she did by Eli. Actually, some of our davening, concepts of davening, the laws of davening, we learn from there. But it worked. She had a baby. She had Shmuel Hanavi, Shmuel the prophet. But at the same time, says the commentaries that Penina was punished. Every time Chana had a baby, one of Penina's children died, and other forms of punishment. Asher Chaim Shmulevitz and others, Penina had good intentions, and it worked. She only did because she loved Chana. She only did it because she wanted Chana to have children. So why did she get punished? Why did she get punished? She did it for the right intention. She did it for the right reason. Says that Rav Chaim Shmulevitz and others, when it says, do not be misled by your good heart, it's warning us to be careful of noble intentions that could sometimes hurt people. Says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, the word fire is still fire. You have good intentions to stick your hand into fire, it's still fire. When you hurt someone, it's still fire. When we have good intentions, we're thinking, we're working with the HR, it says, as I've started off, it says, Lo Sasur, don't be misled. We could be misled that we're thinking that we're using our good inclinations, say the commentaries. We're thinking that this is a positive thing, or we're creating a good thing over here. Right? A sanctuary of nothing bad. We think we're starting something good. We think we're doing something good. You don't understand that you might be hurting other people. You might be hurting yourself also. And when we have good intentions, unfortunately, bad things happen sometimes. And therefore, it says the commentaries, that's why Penina got punished. It's very nice she had good intentions, but at the same time, she still hurt Chana. And that's what it means. Do not follow your hearts. Do not follow your good inclination. Don't be misled. And I think this is something that we really have to work on, something that we really have to think about. I'm talking to myself. It's so hard. How do we know if we're being misled? How do we know if our intentions are good? The outcome of our good intentions are good. Let me rephrase. Or they're bad. It's not easy. And so many times we don't know ourselves because we're caught up in something. You think Penina really thought that she was harming Chana? She would have known. She would never have done it. She's a righteous lady. It says Adam Nogei Tzalatzmo. A person is Nogea. He can't judge himself properly. You know, I just to show how far this goes, I had in Daf Yomi a couple of days ago. It says over there that one of the rabbis said that he didn't judge his students. He never would be a judge over his students. He said, why? It's because his students were so endeared to him that it is as if they were him. And it says, Adam Nageh Eitz Atzmo. One is, a person is biased to himself. Therefore, he couldn't go ahead and officiate a court or judge his students. He would let a different rabbi or someone else do it. Just to show how far this concept goes. It also shows how much his students were endeared to him. But one has to realize that we're Nageh Eitz Atzmo. We have these ideas, we have these thoughts, but we're working with what we think. And since the case of Adam and Chava, since that sin of Adam and Eve, it says evil inclination came inside of us. So we're constantly struggling. We're not sure if this is the good inclination or the bad inclination. We're not sure if the Yetzer Tov or Yetzer Hara. So therefore, we have to ask counsel. We have to ask someone that we trust. We have to make sure that we can see the greater picture and say, what am I doing something that's really, or am I wording it in a way that's really helpful? And this is across the globe, our family, our students, the outcome of our actions. We might be thinking that we're doing something good right now, but how is it going to affect your children, your grandchildren? How is it going to affect your community in a year from now, in a half a year from now, in 3 years from now? What's going to be the ripple effects that are happening? So you're not happy about something right now. Don't allow yourself to react without taking counsel from someone else, because we have no clue. I'm talking to myself. You have no clue if our actions are being misled by our evil inclination to seem like it's our good inclination, our Yetzer Tov. The Yetzer Tov always has our good in it. So let's just do not be misled after your hearts when your evil inclination, or when your evil inclination acts like your good inclination, your Yetzer Tov. He makes himself look like he's your good inclination. And that's an important thing to reflect on and to think about at all times, but especially during these difficult times. We're all struggling and we all want to react in certain ways. And we want to do things. And of course, we're talking about good people. We all have good intentions. No one malicious out there. No one wants to hurt other people. But we don't necessarily really know where things are coming from. And we have to be very, 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 very careful. But so how do we make sure that we're going on the right path? So number one, I said, we have to speak to someone. You have to have a confidence that you speak to a rabbi, right? Someone that knows Torah, right? A good friend that has their head on straight, but could see things in different ways than you. It's so important. You could ask someone that has the same train of thought as you. So of course they're going to say what you're doing is right because they're thinking the same way. Confrontation is good when you're doing it to grow, not to fight. Seeing and hearing other opinions is important. Like we spoke about this morning, the Morning Minute, a little different topic. But it's good when you're trying to figure yourself out. Speaking to someone that has more of a view and be able to look something from a greater perspective. But also, the commentaries say there's a mitzvah of his will should be your will, right? We have to mimic God, right? We have to make sure that our will is God's will. We spoke about this when we learned Pirkei Avot. And say the commentaries that how do we know? How do we make sure that we are not being fooled by the evil inclination? How do we make sure that we take our evil inclination and utilize him for good? Like we said, you should serve God with all your hearts. Again, we said there's serving God with all your hearts, taking an inclination, grabbing it by the horns and doing something good out of it. Those desires, those urges, the need for whatever it is, for direction, eating food, doing it in a mitzvah way, doing it as a relationship with God and growing through that. And then not to be fooled by the evil inclination. Do not follow your hearts and not be fooled by evil inclination to make it sound like it's something good. How do we do that? We do that by recognizing that the path has to follow the Torah. God gave us a guidebook. It says his will should be your will. Our will constantly has to be what Hashem wants, not what we want. Hashem gave us a guidebook of how to do things, how to act on things. And throughout generations, we've had scholars and the oral law being transmitted and being written down, and tremendous works teaching us how to do mitzvot properly, how to think properly, the hashkafa, our philosophy, our conduct. And we have to look and ask from someone that knows Torah, someone that that's what it means, das Torah, the knowledge of Torah. Because ultimately we want to go with the good inclination, and the good inclination wants us to follow the Torah. So we have to make sure that we make our will God's will. And we should say, what would God want? What would God do? Look at the Torah. He'll tell you what he does, what he wants us to do. That's sometimes a little hidden. We have to ask. We might not know. So when we're asking that individual, we're asking someone, again, it has to be made sure that someone that also has Torah knowledge. Someone that is able to look at things from a higher perspective, not involved in the concept itself. So these are important ways of making sure that we don't fall prey to lo tesiru achar levavchem, to follow your hearts. As you said, this is a consecutive mitzvah. Consecutive mitzvah is something that hits us every day and every second, something that we have to be constantly aware of. I think I've said this many times, but I remember hearing this from my Rabbi Greenbaum, and in 8th grade. We say in the prayer, in the Ma'ariv service, we say that God should protect us from behind us and from in front of us. So I remember him asking, he said, in front of us, of course, we want God to remove the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara from in front of us, all the hardships, all the difficulties, the desires. But me'achareinu, from behind us, let him stay behind us. Let's put him in the dust behind us. And he said, and I think he said it from his rabbi, but I don't remember his name. But he said that what it means, the Yetzer Hara is when the Yetzer Hara is pushing us to do things. Sometimes the Yetzer Hara tries to stop us to do things, or to do negative things, to talk bad about someone, to eat something not kosher, to do certain actions that we shouldn't be doing. And we all on our own level and our own growth, of course. The Yetzer Hara always tries to push us to do something a little more. And as you grow, it changes. And that's Mofanenu. But then he said, there's Yetzer Hara that's pushing us to do things. And I remember he was talking about this. He was talking regarding people, some students, and this is 8th grade, that were staying up late learning, which is a good thing, right? We're staying up late learning. But he said sometimes the HR pushes you learn more and more, and as an 8th grader, because he wants you to burn out. He wants you to get physically tired, then you won't be able to learn when you get older. That should be our biggest problems. But the idea is that the Yetzer Hara sometimes pretends, he pushes you, he pretends to be the good. Right? He misleads you to think that he's the Yetzer Tov. And he pushes you, do this, do that, and then start that, and then create this, and go there, and this is all, it's tikkun olam, and it's helping people, and it's helping the society, and it's helping my family, and this is what God wants. It's a tricky business. We don't know. That's why we have to ask. So we have to discuss it with someone and not make rash decisions. So let's just regroup and let's reflect. The constant mitzvah of don't follow your hearts and your eyes. Now, just very quickly, your eyes means to say our eyes are the keys to our soul. And so I think that's pretty straightforward. We have to be careful what we look at. And it's referring to also what our eyes seeing is believing, what we believe in. right? What we take for as truth and not truth. That's not the point of today's class. But today's class, the point is, lo sisirach levavchem, do not go after your hearts. We have a contradiction. We have said it says that it says in the Shema also, right? After Hashem in all your hearts, right? It says the commentaries, Mishnei Trecha, with your two hearts. You have to love God with your Yetzer Tov and your Yetzer Hara. We ask over here. It says you should don't be misled by your two Yetzers, Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. Make up your mind. We explain that number one, we have to be able to grab the Yetzer Hara by the horns. The Yetzer Hara wants us to overcome our challenges. That's number one. Number two, the Yetzer Hara creates passion and desires and needs and wants. Our job is not to crush it, and not to become depressed, and not to become, but on the contrary, where our job is to take some of those and utilize it for good. Make blessings with passion when you eat something and enjoy it. Say, wow, thank you, God, for this wonderful food. If you have a desire for greatness and for doing and accomplishing things, do something good out of it. Shaloshma, balishma. Doing something not for the right reason leads to the right reason when you're doing it still to grow. So that's serving God with the Yetzer Hara, those inclinations and those desires, and utilizing for good, elevating the physical, as we spoke many times. And then the other thing we spoke about is that you shouldn't be, do not be misled by your heart's Yetzer Tov. We said it means to say that when the evil inclination disguises himself as a Yetzer Tov. He disguises, he good intentions. We have good intentions. We started the story of Hannah and Penina. We have to make sure that our actions might have good intentions, but the outcome are good too. The outcomes have to be good, and everybody around it. Hannah got her baby, Shmuel, but she still got hurt. So we have to look at all around, all full circle, making sure the inclination is not involved in this. So that's what it means. The Yetzer Hara is behind this. Sometimes pushes us to do good things, but it's misleading. It's not the right thing. And how do we make sure? Number one, we have to recognize that we're involved. Adam negeh b'etzel when a person is biased to himself, to the inclinations inside of ourselves. We have to ask for help. We have to speak to people. But speak to someone that has a different view than you. Not just along the same way, because then you're just going to rile yourselves up. You both have the same thing. It's important to hear different views. And not to say you have to agree. They might be wrong. It's important to have that dialogue in a healthy, in a civil way, and be the best friends doing it. But more importantly is making sure that someone that has das Torah, someone that knows the Torah, because ultimately, as we said, we have to make his will our will. And to truly make sure that we're not following the inclination, not being misled by the inclination, we have to make sure that we make his will our will, and that's the Torah. And someone that has das Torah could see things in a different way, could notice the different small details. And that's something that we have to work on. So hopefully as we work on these important ideas, especially during this time period, we focus on curving the Yetzer Hara for a positive, for growth. Make sure that we don't let the Yetzer Hara mislead us when we have good intentions. We make sure that our good intentions also have good outcomes in all aspects. Hopefully we should switch this time from sadness to joyous. Wishing everybody a beautiful day and a good week and a Chodesh Tov. I'm going to stop there.